The night it happened wasn't remarkable. Not on the surface. There was no thunderstorm, no dramatic music swelling in the background, no sudden arguments or shattering glass. Just the low hum of the television in a dimly lit room in the quiet wait of a house that had long since fallen asleep. He was beside me on the couch, his thigh barely brushing against mine every so often. At first, I told myself it was accidental. That kind of casual proximity that happens when you've grown comfortable with someone being around. But the truth is, I noticed. I'd been noticing for years. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was familiar. Like the pause between breaths, like a song you've heard so many times you stopped really listening. My husband had gone to bed early after taking something for his back, the same way he did most nights now. His presence in the house had become more of a routine than a relationship. My best friend's son, grown now, no longer the lanky teenager who used to leave wet towels on my floor after swim days, had asked to finish the movie before heading out. Of course, I said yes. Why wouldn't I? It seemed innocent until it wasn't. His hand moved slowly without urgency or drama. It drifted, unsure, down to the space between us. The tips of his fingers grazed the outside of my leg. A feather of contact. I froze. A silent inhale. My muscles tightened, but I didn't move. He didn't move his hand either, and somehow that stillness said more than any apology or excuse ever could. It wasn't a slip anymore. It was a decision, a sharp rise in my frame. And suddenly, the room seemed denser, like the air itself thickened around us. The television flickered in front of us, casting pale blue across our faces. But the images meant nothing anymore. The narrative on screen vanished behind the one unraveling between us in silence. His pinky finger curled and rested against my thigh with intent. He turned his palm upward. I saw it lying there open, not asking, but waiting. My fingers twitched in my lap. I didn't take his hand, but I didn't get up either. There was tension in the space he occupied. I could sense it in his stillness. In the almost imperceptible way, he leaned closer. "You okay?" he whispered. His voice was barely more than a sound. I nodded. That was all he needed. His hand settled fully on my leg, steady, not urgent, just claiming a space it had long imagined but never crossed. I didn't speak. My vision stayed on the TV, pretending nothing had changed, while everything had. A character on screen laughed, a noise that seemed to come from another world. His thumb moved along the curve of my leg, a motion so small it broke something inside me. My stomach clenched. My hands clutched the blanket across my lap, not in protest, but in restraint. When his hands slid higher, cautious and slow, I let my knees fall, slightly apart. I don't know why, or maybe I do. Loneliness can be a long, quiet ache. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It builds in the unnoticed spaces between conversations and days. I hadn't been truly wanted in years, not seen. My husband had grown distant and distracted. I had stopped asking for affection long before he stopped offering it. And when something stops being offered long enough, you start to believe you don't deserve it anymore. This moment on the couch, this thing that wasn't supposed to happen, was everything I had buried. I told myself silence would keep me safe, that nothing acknowledged could hurt me. But silence had also made me invisible. And now a single point of contact was unraveling years of self-denial. We didn't come together. Not then. He didn't look at me. He just kept watching the screen while his fingers traced a pathy on Maine's skin, like a memory he hadn't let go of. I bit my lip. Every part of me betrayed. Me. Every twitch leaned into his presence, begged for more. Inside, I screamed at myself to stop it, to stand, to speak. But I stayed. He leaned in, whispering again, "You don't have to say anything. I'll stop if you want." I didn't answer. And when his finger slipped beneath the hem of my shorts, I still didn't speak because I didn't want him to stop. Not tonight. Not after all the empty nights that came before, not after pretending for so long that I didn't need anything more than duty and routine. He regarded me like I was someone who mattered, like he had waited years to be near me. And maybe he had, and the part that terrified me most was the possibility that I had waited too. When I finally turned to him and met his gaze, I didn't say a word. I met his mouth, slow, trembling, honest. It was the kind of connection that came from a place deeper than wanting. It came from grief, from longing, from the sudden flood of being noticed after years of fading in the background. It came from every time I had stared into a mirror and forgotten who I was beyond the labels of wife, mother, and responsible adult. I didn't sleep that night, even after he left, even after I climbed back into bed beside the man who was still by law and paper, my husband. I lay there staring into the dark, replaying every moment like a film I wasn't ready to end because everything had changed and nothing could go back. For years, I told myself I was fine. That familiarity was enough. That comfort didn't need passion. That politeness could replace affection. We didn't fight. We didn't shout. We were separate. There were no cracks, just a quiet erosion, the soft decay of something that once held warmth. I used to believe that safety meant quiet, but I learned that silence can be its own kind of pain. That night on the couch didn't come out of nowhere. It came from 1,000 unsaid things, from glances that used to carry meaning, and now barely registered. I had stopped asking for contact a long time ago. He had stopped offering it long before that. And into that void, someone else had walked, not with intention or manipulation, but with presence. He had been around for years, my best friend's boy. He grew up in and out of the house, the kind of familiar presence that never drew attention until one day he did. I remember when he came back from college, taller, broader, and quieter. He wasn't a boy anymore. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't casual. It wasn't familial. It was aware. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was projecting loneliness onto someone who just happened to be kind, that the way he asked how I was or stayed in conversation or helped with the fence when my husband was out of town was just good manners. But the truth was buried in the way his hand brushed mine, steady and deliberate, in the way he watched me. Not like a youth looking at an elder, but like a man seeing someone he wanted to know. And for the first time in years, someone saw me not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a woman, as someone who still held something, even if she hadn't reached for it in a long, long time. That was the beginning of the unraveling. And the couch was just where the thread finally gave way. The days that followed moved slowly as though the air itself had thickened around me. Every motion seemed heavier, every glance laced with something unspoken. He didn't come by the next day, and part of me was relieved. Another part waited, watched the clock, and listened for footsteps, or a knock, or the creak of a door. But there was only quiet, the kind that filled a house with questions. I avoided the couch. I found other places to fold laundry, to drink coffee, and to sit and pretend nothing had changed. But it had. Everything had. My husband didn't notice. He never did. He asked about dinner, about the weather, and about the electric bill. He didn't ask about me. The next time I saw him, the boy who wasn't a boy anymore. It was late afternoon. He stopped by with groceries, something he had done many times before. He said his mom had extras and thought we could use some. It was a lie, but a good one. I let him in. He set the bags on the counter and leaned against the sink, arms crossed. Neither of us mentioned that night, but it hovered between us. He reached for a dish towel that had fallen on the floor and brushed my hand in the process. That single incidental connection sent a current through my arm. He looked at me, then really looked for a second. We stood in a silence that screamed, "Are you okay?" He asked again. The same words from the couch, only now heavier. I nodded. It wasn't true, but it was the only answer I could give. He stepped back, respectful, careful. I hated how much I valued that. Later that evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood alone in the kitchen. The floor was cold. The only light came from the open refrigerator as I stared at a carton of juice I didn't want. Behind me, I heard the faintest sound, bare feet on tile. I didn't turn. I knew it was him. He stopped behind me, not close enough for contact, but close enough for awareness. The air shifted. The silence wrapped around us like a shroud. I closed the fridge door slowly, still not turning. My reflection in the glass was faint, ghost-like. "I can't stop thinking about it," he said. His voice was low and raw. Neither could I. I turned, finally. We stood face to face, inches apart, both pretending to be braver than we were. He raised a hand, paused, then brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. It was nothing. It was everything. "We shouldn't," I whispered. "I know." And still we didn't move away. The first meeting of mouths had been trembling and desperate. The second was quieter, deeper, and tinged with knowledge. We knew what we were doing now. We also knew we wouldn't stop. The rest of the house slept as we stood in that kitchen wrapped in something fragile and forbidden. When he came close again, I didn't step back. When his hands moved to my waist, I leaned in. And when we finally stepped apart, shaken, I knew this wasn't a misstep. I would forget. Because it didn't seem like a misstep at all. The following days were a blur of routine, laced with tension. My world didn't fall apart. It simply kept moving as if nothing had happened. And yet everything inside me was tilted. Each smile I gave at the dinner table, each idle chat in the hallway, each coffee cup passed across the counter. It all carried the weight of that moment. I began to fear my own reflection, not because of guilt, but because I could see the change, a kind of glow, a flicker of want, of awareness. It wasn't just the memory, it was the certainty that someone had seen me, regarded me, wanted me not as a duty, not out of habit, but out of choice. We didn't talk about it, not with words. Our conversations were painfully mundane, but there was an undercurrent in everything. When he passed me the salt. When he opened the door and let his hand remain just a moment longer, when our eyes locked for a beat too long. We were walking a tightrope and I was already leaning toward the fall. One evening, my husband announced he'd be gone overnight for a conference. I nodded, pretending it meant little, but my heart thudded against my ribs. That night, I sat alone on the porch. The wine glass in my hand trembled slightly. The cicadas sang in the distance, the sun dipping low in the sky. Then the door creaked. I didn't look up. I knew it was him. His footsteps were familiar now, quieter than my husband's, more hesitant. He sat beside me. Not too close, not too far. Just close enough that the air buzzed. Between us. "You look tired," he said. "I am. Have you been sleeping much lately?" "Not really. Me neither." We didn't look at each other. We didn't need to. Everything between us was loud, even in silence. I sipped my wine slowly. "Is this what you want?" I asked finally. There was a pause. "I don't know what I want. I just know I want to be where you are." I closed my eyes. It was the wrong answer, but it was honest. That night, we didn't plan anything. He didn't creep into my room, we didn't make contact, but we lingered together longer than we should have. We watched a movie we didn't care about on opposite sides of the couch. We didn't connect, but our legs nearly did, and I was aware of his presence as if it were woven into the room. When he stood to leave, he paused by the door,